This is my 6th epic Targaryen history video, and this video is basically just going to be used as a prequel or a setup to the Dance of the Dragons, which is a terrible Targaryen Civil War that we're going to talk about next week. And I'm going to use this video just to talk about the things that helped set up the war that went on between the Blacks and the Greens. So if you haven't seen my Viserys first video, I'd watch that video first and then watch this one. So in 101 AC, the Great Council declared that women could not succeed the throne. It was only males. And Viserys I ended up taking the throne, and he and his wife, Queen Aemma of House Arryn, had tried to have kids over and over again. There were stillborns, there was miscarriages, it was a boy died in the cradle. They were having a terrible time. And then finally, Princess Rhaenyras was born. She was born in 97 AC, and the new king and queen, they doted on her. They loved her. She was their only living child. She was just beautiful. She was smart. She was playful. She became a dragon rider at 7, and the realm dubbed her the realm's delight. They loved her so much. And Viserys said that this is my heir. She is going to be the Princess of Dragonstone and eventually become the Queen of Westeros. And he took her everywhere. When she was 8, he made her a cupbearer for him. So she went to council meetings, she went to tournaments. She just was always at his side, learning and growing. Eventually, his wife, Queen Aemma, ends up dying in childbirth, and the child ends up dying as well. And the king ends up remarrying his Hand's daughter, Queen Alicent. And for a while, Rhaenyras and Queen Alicent they're friends. They're fine. They're cool. Queen Alicent ends up kissing her cheeks at the wedding and calling her her daughter. Everything's fine. Unfortunately, Queen Alicent ends up having boys. So she ends up first having Aegon, and then 2 years later ends up having Princess Helena, and then a few years after that ends up having Aemon, and then eventually. So now Queen Alicent and her father, the Hand Sir Otto Hightower, are like, you have your boy heirs. The Great Council said that boys have to become, the rightful heirs, and Viserys is still like, no, Rhaenyra is going to be my heir of Dragonstone. She is eventually going to become the heir of Westeros. I have decided. And so this is where Queen Alicent ends up getting a little bit pissy because, at first she was like, oh, this is fine, but as soon as I give him boys, of course my boys will become the king of Westeros, like, he's not going to defy the council. And so now that she's realized that Rhaenyra is going to end up being the queen of Westeros and not her boys, she is getting PO'd, and her father, Sir Otto Hightower, is getting PO'd, and he starts scheming so much that eventually Viserys is like, you're no longer the Hand of the King, you are too much in my business, you need to stop. And there starts to become a division. So there's the Greens, which are for Queen Alicent, and then there are the Blacks, which are for Princess Rhaenyra. And there's this whole squabble in the kingdom about who should inherit, and both sides have taken their sides. And it gets to the point where Rhaenyra and her followers, their dragons, end up snapping and spitting fire at Queen Alicent's, the Greens, and their followers' dragons. Keep in mind, Rhaenyra isn't doing anything wrong. She is simply going by what her father has said. She is going to be the Queen of Westeros. She's the Princess of Dragonstone. That's it. She's not scheming. She's not being treacherous. She's not doing anything. It's Queen Alicent who has the bug up her bottom that is causing the issues. At the same time, we have the Sea Snake, Corlys Velaryon, who, son, Lenore, was passed over as king because there was a whole thing, Jaehaerys, 4th king of Westeros, who was trying to decide whether Viserys or Lenore Velaryon should be the new king, and they passed over Lenore and made it so that Viserys was the new king. And so the Velaryons were a little bit hurt by that. They felt passed over. And then again, when the king was remarrying and they were trying to figure out who to remarry after Aemma's death, they said, well, what about Laena Velaryon, which was the Sea Snake's daughter, and they got passed over again. And so there's a lot of animosity. And this ties into the third point, which is Damon, Damon was the younger brother of Viserys, and technically should have been the next heir before Viserys ended up marrying Alicent and her having the boys. And so he started to get PO'd because he felt like he should have been named Prince of Dragonstone, not Rhaenyra. And so he does all these things, trying to get his brother's attention, and it just doesn't work. And so finally, he goes to the Sea Snake, who is a Velaryon, Corlys Velaryon, who also has a problem because, both of his children have been overlooked for being king and queen. And he decides that Damon that they're going to go to the Stepstones and they're going to carve out their own kingdom, and they do that and they putz around over there for a while. But at this point, Damon and him are, you know, best buddies. So the fourth point is that Damon is being scorned. So we know that Damon is pretty, you know, upset about this. He wants to be the Prince of Dragonstone. He is in the Council of Coins and then Lulls, and both time the hand Sir Otto Hightower at the time ends up getting him dismissed. Eventually he becomes the commander of the city's watch and does an awesome job. But in doing that, he also got a lot of friends. So by being in the commander's watch and being the commander of the city's watch and going through the city, he was loved by the people of the city. He was called the Prince of the City, Lord of Fleabottom. He made tons of friends and lots of influences, which would also influence the Dance of the Dragons. A fifth point is Rhaenyra, when she ended up being 16 and named Princess of the Dragonstone, she was supposed to get married. And she had eyes for Criston Cole, Sir Criston Cole, who was a knight. She ended up begging for him to be her protector, and her father allowed it as a child, and she grew up just enamored with him, loving him. She tried to get with him, and he was like, no, I have vows, I can't do this. And then later on, when she's about to get married, it's said that two things are said. One is that he ended up going to her and saying, hey, I love you, I'm finally able to admit it, I see how beautiful you are. Let's run away, let's go to Essos so we can get married, your father can't keep us away from each other. And Rhaenyras basically turned him down and said, no, I'm not going to be with you, I'm just not going to be a wife of some common sellsword, I'm going to be better than that, and spurned him. And some say that's why he eventually turned to the favor of Queen Alicent, because he was like, well fine, screw you, if I'm not good enough to be with you anymore, then I'm not going to be with you together. And then the other tale is that Rhaenyras one last time ended up trying to give herself to him, and he was like, whoa, no, back off. And maybe then out of anger of her keep trying, he then went to Queen Alicent. We don't know. I prefer the story where he was spurned by her, because that would explain how, like, venomous he was towards her, and will help you understand him turning against her next week when we talk about the Dance of the Dragon. So Rhaenyras is supposed to get married. The whole spurning thing happens with Criston Cole. Instead, she ends up giving her virginity to Harwin Strong because she's so upset about marrying Lenore Velaryon, who is openly gay. She ends up marrying Lenore even though she gives her maidenhood to Harwin Strong. She ends up having 3 kids. All of them look like Harwin Strong. They have brown hair, brown eyes, you know, a piggish nose. They look nothing like a Targaryen. So the rumors are that she ended up having the affair with Strong, not with her husband Lenore Velaryon. And so now the Greens, who are for Queen Alicent, are having their tongues wag. So 6, the wagging of the tongues and the boys looking nothing like them causes a fight to break out between the boys of Queen Alicent and the boys of Rhaenyra. Eventually, one of Princess Rhaenyra's boys, Prince Lucerys, ends up taking a knife, stabbing it into the eye of the second-born son of Queen Alicent, Prince Aemon, and takes his eye out after they called them, the boys, Strongs and insulted them. This causes King Viserys to separate the Rhaenyra's kids and Alicent. So Queen Alicent has to stay at King's Landing, Rhaenyra's and her boys have to stay at Dragonstone. So there's tons of animosity with that. And the whole time this is happening, Queen Alicent is just mocking Rhaenyra and being like, you know, keep trying having kids. Maybe one day they'll look like one of you. And just like mocking her and getting the Greens to just be like all snappy about it. And then finally, Rhaenyra's husband ends up dying. And then Damon's second wife ends up dying. And they end up secretly getting married. And they end up having kids together. They have the firstborn and they name it Aegon. And keep in mind, Queen Alicent named her firstborn child Aegon, and so she takes that as a slight, as, you know, they're just taking her name. And then Rhaenyra and Damon end up having a second son named Viserys. Eventually, in 129 AC, Viserys ends up dying, and he, as always, had proclaimed that Rhaenyra was going to be the Queen of Westeros, Princess of Dragonstone. And all this time, all this animosity between Rhaenyra and Queen Alicent was just building and building. Rhaenyra was just doing her thing, saying, I'm going to be the Queen of Westeros one day, because that's what Dad said. And Queen Alicent, with her other people, were constantly trying to undermine her and mock her and scheme against her and say, no, my boys are going to take the throne. I don't care what my husband says. And so then in 129 AC, after all this, back and forth hissing, it comes to a head, and we're going to see next week that the scheming of Queen Alicent and Sir Criston Cole and her father Sir Otto Hightower is going to cause an outbreak civil war between Targaryens, and is called the Dance of the Dragons, and is just a terrible, terrible, bloody war. So, I hope this kind of helps set the scene a little bit more, along with my Viserys the First video, mostly just reiterating what I already said, but kind of getting the animosity that's between the two women and how this is building, and the entitlement that Queen Alicent has, and how Sir Criston Cole was spurned, supposedly, and so that adds to him helping her with the taking of the throne from Rhaenyras, and then how Sir Otto Hightower just constantly was just a scheming dude and just needed to get out of there. So make sure you come back next week when we do a long video. It's probably going to end up being a two-parter video of the Dance of the Dragons, where we talk about the terrible Targaryen Civil War. And besides that, make sure you like and subscribe and come back for more geeky videos every day.